The combat sports community, myself included, constantly talk about the differences between traditional martial arts and combat sports, as if they are separate, irreconcilable things. But even 5 minutes of research into martial arts tells you that that's not even remotely true. Combat sports have traditional elements, and many of them are even older than the arts that we label traditional. It seems like there's a lot of overlap between these categories, yet the arts on both sides often scoff at each other. So is the distinction meaningless? Can an art be both a sport and traditional? Well, yes, of course it can. But that's not really what we're talking about when we refer to traditional martial arts. I would argue that they are actually distinctly different categories of martial arts, with very little overlap. However, the labels we've given them are entirely unhelpful and don't properly convey the meaning that anyone intends. Instead of discussing the dichotomy between traditional martial arts and combat sports, we should be talking about process-oriented arts and results-oriented arts. Not only do these labels actually convey the intended meaning, but they can also teach us a lot about how the standards by which an art is judged can have a massive effect on its future development. So, let's break down what these terms mean and why it really matters. Broadly speaking, a process-oriented approach does not focus on the result itself, but instead focuses on perfecting each step of a process that goes into that result. People that work in air travel, banking, or government organizations often need to have a process-oriented mindset to do their job safely and effectively. They need to follow a strict set of instructions to avoid mistakes and ethical lapses. This method is common in industries with complex moving parts, where no one person can be expected to understand or direct the whole, or in industries with ethical or security concerns. Cooperative endeavors in which you are a cog in a larger machine tend to be process-oriented. As an example, think about driving. Driving is not about getting to your destination efficiently. It's about getting there safely and reliably. It's about following the directions to your destination and making predictable actions that obey the rules of the road so that other drivers can navigate around you. Any driver that decides to innovate an unexplored, faster route to their destination is probably going to crash and never make it there.
Guys, don't worry, I know a shortcut.
Whenever enough people have to work in concert with each other, following the process starts to become more important than innovation and creativity. On the other hand, a results-oriented approach really only cares about the desired end state. A variety of methods and strategies are acceptable, or even necessary, in order to achieve this goal. These approaches are often better in things like sales, software development, and many service industries, where different needs can be met in a variety of ways, and where flexibility and creativity are desirable. This approach can lead to a higher level of innovation and constantly improving processes. However, it can only be used when maintaining predictable and cooperative links in a complex chain isn't a concern. Now, if you still don't understand the distinction, let me give you a true story that might help. In 5th grade, I took a math test. On this test, I got every single answer correct, but I didn't show my work. My teacher gave me an F because she couldn't see how I got the answers. From a results-oriented perspective, I got all the questions right, which is great. But from a process-oriented perspective, I didn't follow the instructions, so I failed. I wasn't being judged on what answers I got. I was being judged on how I got them. Now, how does this micro lesson on organizational culture relate to martial arts? Well, when you throw a punch, are you focusing on having good form, posture, and alignment, or are you just focusing on safely landing the hit? The former example is a process-oriented approach, focusing on the individual steps involved in the action. And the latter is results-oriented, focusing solely on the desired end state. When combat sports practitioners criticize traditional martial arts, we're really criticizing process-oriented arts. And when we talk about the advantages of combat sports, that's a shorthand way of talking about results-oriented arts. But why does this divide exist? Why are traditional martial arts process-oriented while combat sports are results-oriented? Well, it all comes down to how you answer a simple question. How do you know if you're good at your martial art? In combat sports, it's pretty simple. Are you winning? If you're beating up world champions, then you're very good at it. It doesn't matter whether you're throwing wild punches or what kind of guard you have. If you're getting good results at a high level, then you're doing the art correctly. However, not all martial arts have those kinds of competitions. And when your martial art doesn't even spar, how do you know when you're good at it? If there are no results, then by what metric are you judged? Well, the predominant answer is to instead ask whether you're doing the moves correctly. Did it work gets replaced with, did you do it with proper form? It's no longer a question of whether your tactics and strategies are effective, and it's instead a question of whether you did the right moves the right way in the right order. Essentially, are you correctly following the process? Combat sports largely follow a results-oriented approach because they can. They have results that can be looked at. And fighting doesn't have any complex causality chains we need to worry about. It's a competitive endeavor, not a cooperative one. Despite this, traditional martial arts still follow a process-oriented approach because they have no way to definitively measure results. And looking at the process is the only other way to judge performance. And the difference between these two approaches is not trivial. A process-oriented art encourages its practitioners to perform specific moves in specific ways. The goal, if you will, is to achieve a certain aesthetic, comfort, enjoyment, mindset, or something, not to use it for a purpose and then be finished. The entire point of a process-oriented approach is to prevent people from creating novel solutions to problems. It serves to constrain human behavior. In some industries, that's a very necessary thing. However, in martial arts, all this does is completely stifle innovation and prevent students from learning the kind of problem solving that they need in an actual fight. Many professions lend themselves to one approach or the other, and martial arts is no exception. In terms of becoming an effective fighter, a results-oriented approach is the clear and indisputable answer. A results-oriented art encourages individuality, creativity, and finding new solutions to problems. A one-size-fits-all approach simply does not work for martial artists because each person is different. That means that every new fight represents a unique matchup of body types and personalities. The arts that are going to be successful are the ones that teach students to creatively strive towards a definitive goal. This is the real reason that combat sports succeed. It's not because they're less traditional, it's because they're results-oriented. And this distinction is not only important in judging different martial arts, it's also critical in understanding gym culture and in your own personal development. Within martial arts, becoming process-oriented is actually an easy trap to fall into. It's a way to measure your progress without the stress of sparring or competition. And it's also a much easier way for the instructor to teach. Having a results-oriented gym culture means that each student is likely going to have a different style. When every student is doing a different thing, teaching and correcting them becomes very difficult. The instructor now has to do constant, complex problem solving in order to help each student advance. However, when you're teaching them a specific process, you don't have to do all that. Nitpicking students on their form is an easy way to make yourself seem smart. It requires zero problem solving, and doing a move 100% textbook perfectly is rather difficult, meaning that you seem to always have more corrections for them. And fostering a process-oriented gym culture means that students are more likely to closely follow your instructions, which can make you feel like a god. But in a results-oriented culture, students will constantly be modifying the drills and going off script in an attempt to innovate. And if you're a coach with a very fragile ego, which is all too common, then you're not going to like that at all. Likewise, a process-oriented approach is also a trap that students can put themselves in. Attempting to get a certain result in live sparring is really hard. You have to problem solve and strategize while being punched in the face. However, attempting to follow the same rote process is cognitively much easier, meaning that in many ways, it's less stressful to continually throw the same unsuccessful combo over and over than it is to actually find a way to win. Even when they're getting beat up, they can still tell themselves that they're doing the moves with better form, so they're actually better than the person constantly hitting their face. A process-oriented approach can inadvertently protect hierarchy and egos. If one of your new students is a phenomenal athlete, they might quickly be able to outspar some of your more advanced students, and even the instructors. In a results-oriented gym, you'll be forced to admit that the new guy is better than you. But in a process-oriented gym, you can say, well, he's not even doing the moves correctly, so actually I'm still better. Instead of figuring out what the new guy is doing and learning from that, some people's egos can tempt them into dismissing the new guy altogether. Fighting is a zero-sum competitive activity that encourages innovation and rewards unpredictability. Because of this, a results-oriented approach is simply better. However, this approach can also be very challenging and has the tendency to shatter egos, meaning that the temptation to abandon results in favor of process will always exist. In combat sports, competition presents a way to keep yourself and your gym in check. But in other arts, a process-oriented approach is often the default way of learning. And a lot of those arts are more traditional than combat sports. And adherence to tradition is just one of the natural conclusions of a process-oriented mentality. However, process-oriented and results-oriented is really the terminology that we should be using. While not every art is going to perfectly fit into these categories, the division is at least much cleaner than the terms we're currently using. Thinking about arts in terms of process versus results is a more accurate way to portray the intended meaning. And being cognizant of the different approaches that martial arts take can help to teach us more about martial arts, fighting, and our own approaches to problems. So, I guess the moral of the story is that learning about organizational culture somehow helped me learn about fighting. Weird.